We're going to start this lesson by taking a quick look at storing the character into the Animate library. The reason for doing this is that if we don't store it into the library, this character will only be available in this particular file. So what we want to do is drop it into the Animate library, which is a universal library available each time you open Animate. So if you start to create characters and you store them all in the library, each time you open Animate, create a new document, everything's available at all times. So let's start off by looking on the stage here. If we go to the right hand side here, we've got the library tab open, and at the moment we can see all the body parts listed for the character, and that's because we have the symbols folder selected. What we need to do is take the character and store it into the folder beneath called the Animate Library, and at the moment you'll see it's got this little padlock icon on there. That means we can't access it at the moment. We need to unlock this before we can store anything in there. That's very simple to do. All we need to do is have the folder selected, right click, and on this fly out menu go to the top and just click right to modify, and that will take off the padlock, so now we can just drop stuff into there straight away. So making sure your character's all rigged and good to go and neat and tidy. We've got everything stored in the peg. So this is all rigged up. This is the character we made in the previous lessons, and we're just going to store it in the library. So all you need to do, as I say, make sure everything's rigged up. You've just got as many cells open as the character is there for. So you know we've just got this in one cell, and just selecting the peg here, I can just click, drag into the library. This will appear asking us to rename that, which would be a good idea because at the moment it's calling it peg, which isn't much use. So we're just going to call it what it is. So let's just call this Stickman. If we OK that, it's now in the library. So this is it here. You've got a folder icon there, stickman.tpl, which is the standard Animate file format. And each time we open Animate and create a new document, this will always be here in the library. So if you amass all these different characters and sceneries you've built, they'll always be available in the library here. So for instance, say we have just opened this new document, so let's remove this from the stage. Okay, so this is a new document, we've just opened it, and the Animate library shows us we've got this Stickman. We don't need to double click to go into this folder, we just need to drag the entire thing onto the stage. So just click, drag, and you see it's placed it on the scene here. Down in the timeline it's got its own layer called peg, and a good thing here is we can drag and drop as many times as we like. It's called this one peg_1, again peg_2, and these are all independent of each other. So you know, if we move animate one character, you know, we can animate them all individually, so they're not linked animation wise. So this is handy for when we start to create these kind of interactions between the characters. So I just wanted to quickly show you how to store your character into the library now that it's complete, because I know sometimes it can be confusing. If you create a character, then you go to open Animate and you can't access the character you created in another file. You have to store it in the library for it to be accessible universally. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to pause the video. I'm going to create a new document that will be included in with a package. Just so you've got a separate new document away from the walk cycles and so on that you can navigate to if you need to play around with it, pick it apart and so on. So I'm just going to pause and drop back in a second. Okay, so I've just created a new document here. If you look at the top here, it's called Stickman_animating_01. So this is the file for this particular lesson that will be included in with the package. So just a brand new document, and as I say, let's take a look at the library. So we've got nothing here, we've just got an empty layer sitting there waiting. So if we come over to library, click on Animate Library. Now it's got the padlock on it again, but we don't need to store anything in there. We're just pulling the character out. So you'll see here the stick man is sitting in the library. Again, we can just click, drag onto the stage, and there's the character all ready to animate. If we go to the symbols layer, the symbols folder rather, you'll see all the individual parts here. And again, you know, if you wanted more than one copy of this stick man out on the stage, you could just pull them out as many times as you like. In this lesson, we're just going to work with one figure for the time being. What I'm going to do is just add a white background, just so we've got a bit of crisp colour in the background there for your viewing pleasure there. So I'm just going to lock the character layer for the time being and drag it to the top. So we've got the drawing beneath, and on the drawing layer I'm just literally going to put a rectangle in there. So I'm going to go to the shape tool. The flyout has gone onto my secondary monitor, so I'm just going to select the rectangle and let's just pull this out outside the stage there. Okay, so using the paint bucket, I'm going to select the white colour. Okay, and I think that will do for the time being. Let's unlock the character and zoom in. So at the moment we just have one cell of everything here. So we want to expose this for more frames. So I'm going to come out to about 100 at the moment and scroll through those two cells there. Just hit F5 and this will give us 100 frames of exposure for this file. I previously opened up the timeline to 200, so we may go further than that. Actually, I'll put that down to 200 now. Okay, so the drawing layer is locked, which is separate, and this is our character peg here, which we're going to work with. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is bring some new tools out onto our timeline that we'll take a look at shortly. What we're going to do is come up to Windows here, Toolbars, come down to Timeline View and just click this. And what this does, this brings up this set of tools here. These are all keyframing tools and tweening and stop motion tools. So we'll take a look at those shortly. Okay, let's take a close look at the IK system in Animate. We saw earlier how we could apply nails to certain parts of the character by shift clicking any of these pivot points. So we could move anything after that point, but anything behind it remains stationary. Let's just unclick this. Another way we can do this, if we're out using the transform tool, we can select the part we want to apply a nail to, then move to the IK tool, open the tool properties, and then down here in the IK menu in this section we've got this icon here with the nail on it. If we just hit that, this will apply a nail to the same piece here you've selected, so we can move this. And there's also another tool next to the nails here called Hold Orientation. Now what this will do, if we click this, you'll see this blue line go all the way down this bone. Now what it's done is we've applied a nail to it, but we've also held the orientation, so we can't actually move that entire bone, so it's just locked off that entire section. So all we can do here is apply movement to the wrist. So let's undo those. I'm just going to click those off. So that will come in handy for certain movements if you need to lock, say, an entire leg to perform a kick, and things like that. If you need to keep a leg stationary on the ground while the rest of the body lifts up to kick, and so on. So it becomes useful for that. And also at the moment, you'll remember that we've got a point outside of this character on the peg itself. So if we go to the transform tool and select the whole character, this point here, this blue circle, this is the outermost pivot point of the entire peg. So this is at the very top of the hierarchy. So if we go back to the IK, it's this point here. What will happen if we start to pull any part of this character, we're just going to rotate around this point. So what we need to do is change the behaviour of this point. At the moment we can't, I'm trying to click and drag and it just won't move. All we're doing is we're just rotating around this point. So in order for us to perform certain animation using the IK, say we want to bend the character at the knees, I'm going to need to pull this character down. So if I try and pull down, nothing's happening, it's locked in place and we can just rotate around it. So what we need to do is change the behaviour of this point right at the top of the hierarchy. It's very simple to do. All we need to do is we just need to click on it. So I'm going to zoom in because there's a little group of points there. We just want to make sure we get the correct one. Now these two at the top here, these are the legs, so I know it's this point here. Okay, so all we need to do is just click on it. Just click once, you'll see no change, but you've selected it. Then come over to here where we've got the IK tools. You can see here selection, we have selected the peg, which is at the top of the hierarchy. And what we want to do, this tool here, enable translation if top of the hierarchy. What that's going to do, once we click this, it'll change the behaviour of that pivot point. So let's click that. Now you'll see we've got this crosshair appear within that pivot point to show us the change. And what this means now, let's zoom out a bit, is that we can now move the character. So this point here, if we go back to the IK, you'll see we can now move that character. We're not just rotating around it. So you can see here I'm pulling the arm and we're not rotating around there now. So this means that if I want to do something like lock the feet into position, I can now pull this point down and we'll have movement. Okay, so let's go back out to the transform tool here. Incidentally, sometimes actually when you are in the IK system, you'll sometimes find that you'll go to move this and it won't move. You'll find it locked in place. All you need to do in that instance is come back out to the transform tool and then give a little nudge or just go back straight to the IK and you should be able to move it. Sometimes it just locks it in place for some reason, so just go back out to the transform, give a little wiggle, go back in, you should be fine. Okay, what we're going to do, we're just going to pose the character out into a stance here. So I'm just going to have him kind of stand in a bit more relaxed so he's looking less like the gingerbread man. Okay, so these legs I'm just going to just kind of plant down a bit firmer on the ground here. These arms we'll just bring down. Okay, so what I want to do here, I just want to bring the body down, keep the feet stationary, so it's kind of just performing a bend at the knees. So at the moment we know that if we go into the IK and I want to pull this torso down, if I do it at the moment I'm just going to pull the entire character down. So we need to lock these feet into place. So what I'm going to do, just select the first foot, transform tool, then I'm going to move to the IK tool, scroll down, I'm going to apply a nail to it, and I'm also going to hold the orientation so we've got no movement whatsoever on the foot there. Go back out to the transform, do exactly the same with the opposite foot. Okay, so now we've got both feet held into place with nails. We know that because the pivots have turned red, and we know we've held the orientation because we've got the blue lines overlapping the bones now. So what should happen, when I now pull this main peg point, we should be able to bend at the knees. There we go. So we can create all these movements just like this. Okay, what I want to quickly do is just show this movement on the timeline. So let's get him standing kind of upright, something like that. So let's just animate this. So on the first frame here on the timeline, remember I've exposed this character for 200 frames, so we know that wherever we go we have this. Okay, so what I want to do at frame 10, I want this to remain the same. So from frames 1 to 10 I just want him standing in this position. So what we can do, select frame 10, we can either hit F6, which is a shortcut for adding a keyframe, or we can come up to insert, keyframe, or these tools we brought down earlier. We've got some keyframing tools here. So these 4 here with KF on, the one with the plus sign is add keyframe, the one with the minus is minus keyframe, and this one here goes back to the next keyframe. So if we click this, we go back to this keyframe, and the one next to it jump forward to the next keyframe. So frame 10, let's just hit the plus keyframe. Okay, so I want to keep this as it is. So if we scroll through from 1 to 10, we've got no change. And this line here, if you've got a line between the 2 keyframes, this is representing a motion. So for instance, if we move to keyframe 10, let's move this arm up. Okay, just to demonstrate this. So go back to frame 1, then scroll through from 1 to 10, we'll see we've animated the arm moving up there. Okay, so this line shows that we've got a tween there. We're in betweening from keyframe 1 to keyframe 10. Now you can change the behaviour of this. If we go back to this keyframe here, you'll see we can now access these 2 tools here. Now we've got set motion keyframe, which we're already doing, and next to that we have stop motion keyframe. So if we click this whilst on this first keyframe, you'll see that that line now disappears. Now what this means, it's taken all the in-betweening out. So for the first 9 frames we're just going to have this stationary pose, and then at frame 10, bang, that just snaps into place. So we've taken the in-between out. So we'll be using this tool throughout the animations. So if we go back to keyframe 1, we can apply motion again by clicking this icon here to add the motion, and sure enough we've applied that tween there. Okay, so I don't want this to happen. I want this from frame 1 to 10 to be just this. So what we can do here is go to frame 10, and now we can minus keyframe. If we just hit that, it deletes that keyframe, and we've just back to this start position now. So that will delete the keyframe, but it won't remove any frames from the timeline. Okay, so here again we're just going to add a keyframe. I mean, we've got no change here, but just to practice this, I'm just going to use this button here just to remove the tweening, even though there's no change. Okay, so between 10 and 20 we're going to perform this bend at the knees. So frame 20, let's add a keyframe. Okay, so now we need to bring this body down. So let's move to the IK. The feet are all locked down into position. So all we need to do, just grab this, bend at the knee. Okay, and say around, let's keep it nice and even. So frame 30, add a new keyframe, and I think what we'll do, we'll hold that between here and here. So maybe here, this keyframe, let's just remove any tweening. So here we know we've got just this holding. Then at frame 40, add a keyframe. Let's move back up, so around there. Frame 50, add a keyframe. Let's remove the tween from there. I think if you even go in the middle, yep, you can remove the tween. Okay, so let's go back to the start here. And if we scroll through slowly, let's just observe what's going on here. So frame 1 to 10 is stationary. Then here we can see the tweens because we've got the motion lines here. So we can see here we're bending at the knees, holding that pose, coming up, holding that pose. And the frames after frame 50, they're all the same, so we're back into this position. So this will last up till frame 200 unless we make any changes here. Okay, so this you could use the transform tool to create this movement without using the IK. So you could use the transform tool alone. It would involve a bit more work because you'd have to figure out the placement of the feet, you know, beforehand. You'd have to bring the legs up, bring them down, and so on. In a previous course we looked at just those problems, exercises in animation. We worked solely with the transform tool just to try and figure out certain movements without using IK, without using nails to nail feet to the ground while the other foot lifts up off the ground and things like that. We just dealt with animation with just a transform tool, which I think is good practice because it gets you to learn the tools inside out and learn the articulations of the characters. So you can work both ways, but if you're working on a production on your own, time is of the essence. So of course you want to use the most time efficient techniques possible. So using this IK for this particular movement is a great little time saver. All you'd need to do is just, although the feet are locked into position, you'll see here if I bring this down, you get a certain amount of dip there. You see where the feet raise and lower, and all you need to do is just kind of tweak that. So you know, at its lowest point around halfway here, you could just select the character, nudge it up slightly, a bit more. And so on. So you need to go in and tweak a little bit, but the IK tool will make the process quicker. Use it in conjunction with the transform tool. You don't just want to use the IK on its own for all your animation. Just use it to assist you in certain movements to help the production. And again here, let's just lift this up. Okay, so let's hit play. Okay, so that's quite a quick dip. You could time it out a bit longer if you want him to go lower, or make it last over more time. So you could go maybe frame 10 to 30 on the dip, bring it down, and so on. So let's watch this again. Okay. So of course another thing you can do, let's add a keyframe here. And let's set a keyframe at 80, so let's stretch this one out across 20 frames. So keyframe here. These two here, 50 to 60, these are going to be static, so let's take away any tween there. And then at frame 80, let's go back to the IK and let's kind of stretch to the side there. Frame 100, keyframe. In here we don't want any tweening, so let's just remove that. And another 20 over, keyframe. Let's bring him back. Okay, so let's go outside and watch this now. Press play. Oops. Okay, so again here you would need to just tweak a little bit on the feet there, but bearing in mind we haven't had to use the transform tool for the entire procedure, it's a lot quicker. We've only really got to go in and just tweak the entire body here. I think it was at this point, yeah, this point. We've only really got to tweak this dip here, so we only need to really deal with the height change there with these feet. So that's a lot easier than using the transform tool the whole time and having to move every little piece bit by bit over time. So this is a lot quicker. Okay. Yeah, something like that. Okay. Let's zoom out a bit and watch this. Actually, let's go to around 110 and just bring this up slightly. Okay, let's play it from here, from this distance. Okay. Right, we've got up to frame 120. What I'm going to do, let's go to 130, add a keyframe. And what I'm going to do now is unlock the feet. So let's select the whole character. This batch here, I think we'll have stop motion, so let's just remove that. Not that we snap into any movements at any point, but it just indicates when we're looking at the timeline where we haven't got any movement. So here, let's go to the IK and I'm going to unlock the feet. So let's select using the transform tool and then go in, because we need to remove the orientation being held there. Okay, and okay, at this point between 130 and say 150, let's add a keyframe, and at frame 150, using the transform tool, I'm going to raise both the arms up let's move the hands into this position. Okay, so from 120 we've got 10 frames of stationary, then we've got these arms coming up like this. Okay, so at frame 60, let's add a keyframe. We'll have 10 frames of stationary motion there, and then here I'm going to lock the hands in place. So let's select a hand, go to the IK, just need to apply the nail, hold the orientation, back to the transform, do exactly the same with the opposite hand. Okay, so now what we have is the opposite effect, so the feet will be free to move, and now we'll be able to move the body upwards. So we've got 10 frames of no motion, so say frame 180, add a keyframe, and here let's just move up. So now the arms go up and he's kind of pulling himself up. Imagine you've got two walls either side. Okay, let's give ourselves some more frames. Let's pull out. So around 320, so I'm just going to scroll down here, hit F5. Okay, where were we? 180. Okay, so we've got this motion here, 160 to 180. We're pulling ourselves up with the arms. 190, let's keyframe, have 10 frames of no motion, and then say around 200. Add a keyframe, go to the IK, let's swing this let's go maybe down, maybe not so far, maybe sort of about there. Hold this for 10. Let's remove any motion. Let's pull ourselves up again. And at 40, keyframe. Let's come all the way down. Actually, we could add kind of a swing to the feet. If we use the feet, we can actually apply this kind of swing. So let's go about here, add a keyframe. Something like that. Let's remove any tween in here. Okay. And then here I think we'll unlock the hand. So let's select this hand separately, go to the IK, remove the nails and the hold orientation, the same with this hand. So frame 70, 270, set a keyframe. And using the transform tool, I'm going to bring these down. So, you know, obviously I'm mixing up between the IK and the transform tool. So as I say, you don't want to use the IK at all times. Okay, something like that will do. So we've got the arms coming down. Okay, let's go to the front. Let's zoom out a little bit. And we'll just press play. There we go, so he's having a little warm up before he starts any real action. Okay, so this is just to show you the tools that we're working with in these lessons. You know, we're going over the IK to, you know, really demonstrate how to apply nails, hold orientation, most importantly changing the behaviour of this pivot point on the outside of the peg, because that can get quite confusing if you overlook that and you start to work with the IK and you think, you know, why am I just rotating around this point? I can't move the entire character. So we've changed the way that that behaves, so now we can manoeuvre the character freely. We've looked at these tools here where we've added and removed keyframes, worked with the motion here so we can add and subtract any motion. So this is just setting us up for the way that we're going to animate. So everything's in place, we've stored the character into the library, so we're all good to go. So we could just bring in another character from the library and start to get these characters interacting. So have a practice with the IK, spend quite a bit of time just figuring out you know, how to use the nails and so on, mixing up between your transform tool and your IK. And just generally practice. And as I say, this file is included in with a package. This is file Stickman Animating 01. So drag this file up, just play around with it, maybe copy the motion on a separate layer with the new Stickman in, and just have a practice. And when you're ready, move on to the next lesson and we'll start dealing with some other actions and some interaction between characters.